Hello, old school RuneScape. Welcome to this week's developer Q&A or Modcast, or all of us just hanging out and having a great time. I'm your host, Mod Sween. I am delighted to be joined by Mod Husky.
Hello.
Mod Lenny.
Oh.
And behind the scenes, we've got Mod Spear making things happen as always, and we've got Mod Sani who's collecting questions. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer, at old school RS in the chat, and he'll pass them on to us. Let's start with the usual announcements. Exclamation mark areas in the chat, and you'll be linked to a brand new blog that went up about half an hour ago. What does that blog do? It contains details of all areas, including an in-depth look at the very pretty interfaces that are coming with leagues. And in those interfaces, you get lots of information about stuff, bosses, and all the other stuff. Exclamation mark minigames. Last week, we released a blog which looked at Soul Wars and other minigames. Notably, a really cool, in my opinion, rework or revamp to the Shades of Mortar minigame. We'll be updating that blog with feedback changes and poll questions later this evening. It should have been done already. It's my bad. I've been coaching some of the newbies on uploading news to the module, which we did with the region stuff. So after the stream, there'll be a new Soul Wars and minigames blog coming up for you. What else? Exclamation mark wallpaper for some awesome desktop backgrounds featuring the great Trailblazer art styles. Exclamation mark leagues. By now, I'm sure you know that Leagues 2 will be here on October 28th, but give the trailer a watch if you haven't seen it already. I leaked it last week. It's a really good one. Exclamation mark Gazette. Recently, we published September's Gazette. In that, we talk roadmaps, we talk Leagues design, we introduce you to a new engine developer. There are updates on active projects, and we ask for your thoughts on porting content from RuneScape to old school RuneScape. And lastly, exclamation mark Prime. Get 7 days of membership when you link your old school account to Prime Gaming, only until October 13th. Right, that concludes the announcements. Let's get into the questions, and we'll start as we do always. I'd like to find out how everybody's doing. So, Mod Husky, we'll go to you first. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. We've had a lot of intense discussions about the whole league balancing thing recently, and it's just good to see everyone super excited about this, to get everything right, and to we're finally like this 2 weeks getting a chance to play everything sort of together. Like I've tried out random relics from time to time. I've checked the tasks, and I've seen what it's like in areas. But I think getting to play it as a player with no cheats is like a completely different experience sometimes, and I think it's a really good way to get a grip on the content. So that's been a lot of fun, keeping me in a good mood.
We've got the all-day relics playtest tomorrow too, haven't we? For the whole team to get stuck into. I've not really touched it much, so I've set time aside to make sure I can jump in and try it out as well. Okay,
I think the relics are.
No, you carry on, man.
I was just saying, I think the relics are probably the thing everyone's most looking forward to as well, right? So it's the exciting punch that Leagues has. So it'll be good to see the rest of the team think about them all.
For sure. Okay, Mod Lenny, how's it going with you? What have you been up to?
It's been pretty good. I've been up to a lot of different things. I've been kind of all over the place, context switching constantly, helping out with a bit of everything all across the team. I was not expecting to be carrying on work with leagues this week, but as of last Friday, here I am again. So yeah, it's good, but all over the place.
How are you finding working in the office? Because we can see there's a Jagex studio behind you right now.
It's still really strangely quiet, but I'm very happy to be back in the office. I know that a lot of people took really well to working from home. I did not quite so well. So yeah, being back in the office has been great for me, and I'm really glad that I can keep working here with very few people around. Got all the benefits of being in the office for a nice work environment, but all the benefits of being on my own at home.
I mean, it looks very similar to how the studio used to look at like 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. And those are my favourite times to work in the office. No one's around, a couple of people, you're left to your own devices.
Yeah, the entire day is basically what it would be like when I was leaving the office before.
Ah, jealous. You know what? I'm getting a bit fed up of working from home now too. I still love not commuting, but to be in the office would be awesome. But for me, I've got that, an hour and a half commute, so I'll probably still be working from home until next year. Anywho, okay, everyone's good. I love it. Fantastic news. Let's jump into some League's questions. Okay. So you've both been working on leagues recently, so I'll come to you both for answers. Let's start with Husky and then work our way from left to right. Okay, so the question is, we know you've tried to balance the regions as best you can, but in your opinion, which is the strongest region and which is the weakest region?
It's hard to say. Because like every region has its own content, so that's one thing. Every region has its own tasks, which we've created, and then how do those relics play into it is such a hard thing to say. I think that Kandarin offers the most just versatility, and I think that it will be a good choice no matter what. And I think that's just because it offers so much in terms of a variety of skilling activities. It has a good amount of gear, but maybe not some of the best gear. It's got a lot of general just goodness going for it that I think it's going to be a popular choice. And it's also very familiar, I suppose, to a lot of players, right? When people unlock membership for the first time, Kandarin's the place they spend most of their time, right? Whether it's stealing in the RD markets to fishing at Catherby Shore, right? It's got a lot of nostalgia to it. And then weakest, I think like most people kind of know this. I think that it's probably the desert. When you look and break it down, it probably doesn't actually have all that much content compared to other areas. Like if you look at the amount of, say, PVM drops, you've got like Calphite Queen. You've got Calphite Queen, right? So it has other things as well. Like obviously you've got the Sorceress Garden training stuff. You've got Magic Training Arena. And there's like some agility methods. There's a lot of skilling stuff as well with like the pyramids, Pyramid Plunder and stuff. And it has some pretty cool synergies, as people have pointed out, with Taranwin. Like if you can actually have an infinite supply of darts for your blowpipe, we all know how strong blowpipe is, right? Just imagine how strong blowpipe is with relics. So I think it's got some potential there. Ancients is going to be pretty big as well if you pick Wildy, right? You might just pick Desert for Ancients and go there. But I think it has just the least amount of content to get excited about, right? It doesn't have flagship content either, really. You know? Like Mori has Theatre of Blood or Taranwin has Gauntlet, right?
So it sounds like you're saying that the desert could be the big brain theory. It doesn't seem initially, at a glance, a really powerful region to go. But those kind of early game metas, access to ancients and stuff, could be quite beneficial. And darts too. I've seen so many people in the chat say, well, if only we had like the Menaphos raids and Desert Treasure 2 before Trailblazer, then it would be completely stacked. Where we've been catering too much for man. So Mauritania's busy now.
It was one of the interesting things, right? At one point in our schedule, we were like, ooh, is Fishing Skill Boss going to be out before Leagues or not? Because I think that was the platform to that just happened to be in the desert, right? And I was like, as someone who learned about that, I was like, that might help me in desert a little bit, right? But it turns out that we pushed that back obviously to later on, and you know it's not going to have that. But that might have been a nice benefit if it had been out in time.
Okay, Mod Lenny, how about you? What do you think is the strongest? What do you think is the weakest in terms of areas and regions?
So I think weakest I'm going to side with the desert. Strongest, I'm not too sure what's technically the strongest, but I think for sort of me as a player, my play style, that Mauritania would be really good. I'm not going to be hardcore like endgame PV or anything, so I feel like Barrows and the Slayer Tower have a lot to offer for a player like me. There's a lot of gear there that would be pretty straightforward to get.
Cool. Okay. So it seems like there's going to be a bit of a consensus. Do you expect to see a lot of players following the same playing styles in day one? I imagine, week 1 and week 2, guides start happening, people start establishing metas to follow through. But day one, are you expecting people to follow a certain path? Or do you reckon it will just be like a nice, heady mix of people everywhere?
It's hard to say. Everyone gets Misthalin and Karamja at the start. I think day one, we will have people get to the third area. Maybe that's it. I think day one, people who get there really quickly are probably going to be the people who theory crafted the most, and they may just go out on a limb and pick a niche area, right? For something they've thought of that no one else has. I think over time, Agarnia sound like the most popular areas that people will trend towards, just because people like God Wars, people know a lot of those areas. But I think there's a lot of niche to other places, right? It's just really hard to tell, I think. And I think that whatever Wooks picks is probably not going to be very less Wooks level player friendly choices.
I'm looking forward to the equivalent moment of Wooks soloing Ulm with terrible gear at low levels. I can't wait for whatever stream that's going to look like. You mentioned theory crafting. That's cool. I've got a question coming up a little bit later talking about player theories. And then I think the Monday prior to the League's release, we're going to have like a dedicated theory crafting stream. So we'll share news of that. So the next question I've got, are there any design decisions that you regret? Or are the things you have already identified to do differently for Leagues 3, whatever Leagues 3 may be?
I think it's difficult. Because I think like at the end of this league, I'm probably going to have like 100 things I wish I had changed or done differently. Once I've had a time to play test it, once you see how the metas evolve. It was the same in Twisted League. And some of those changes might just be a small tweak here or there that most players haven't noticed, but I'm like, oh, that would feel nicer if this was done, right? But if you're asking for Leagues 3, it kind of can't be related to the rule set because we don't know what the rule set for that's going to be, so I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see if this rule set offers a bit too much complexity. Like you've seen that areas block, right? There is so much text for each area that it could be a bit too hard to digest and plan differently, and to really fully conceptualize all those areas, right? And their strengths. And I don't think anyone will going into launch. I think there's going to be sleeper, strong picks that people have overlooked, right? I've even got strategies that I'm not sharing with the players publicly that I've thought of, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone else has, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see if we maybe need to go for a more straightforward rule set, because Twisted League was a very straightforward rule set, right? You didn't need to think about the rules; they just happened. But now there's a strategic choice as part of the rules, right? So,
yeah, I think Twisted League was a very happy accident in a way. Imagine we tried selling the concept of leagues beginning with this type of content. It'd be really hard to communicate and buy players, like have players bought in to understand why we're trying to do what we're doing. But by saying, hey, you're locked to an area, you're an Iron Man, go nuts. That's quite like an easy introduction. But then by adding this layers of complexity and making it quite clear that each league is very different. I think that was one of the other troubles we had with the kind of transition from Twisted League to the next league. Branding. Even internally, so many, I don't want to say arguments, but I will say arguments about how it should be called, how it should be referred to. Is there a hyphen? Is it a colon? I don't know. Is it league? Is it leagues? Is it Trailblazer League? Or is it Leagues 2 Trailblazer? We've had to kind of work it out as we've gone along. How about you, Mod Lenny? Any design decisions you regret or things you'd like to do differently?
I don't think any particular decisions that I regret, considering I've not for the most part been working on leagues. There's been a few little bits and pieces that I've been pulled on for. I've kind of just been sitting here watching this huge design form from nothing, and I'm sure there's been a million and one sort of questionable decisions in there that the team that have been working constantly on it have been debating, and I've just not been seeing quite that level of detail for it all. But it's definitely one of those things that's a lot easier to look back on after it's been released and say, okay, yeah, maybe that could have been tweaked, maybe that could have been done better. But nothing that jumps out to me sort of at this point in time, no.
Cool. I love that you mentioned the debating as well, because I think, an hour and a half ago, there's the message from Mod Husky in one of our Slack rooms. Hey guys, hoping you can help settle the debate we're having. We're very clearly split down the middle. And that is so true for so many design stuff.
The funny thing is, in the Wardens we were 4 votes either side, and now we're 9 votes one way, 8 votes the other. It's still split regardless, and it's just we have to make a decision, right? You know, and if one vote is what settles it, right? Yeah.
I think it's perfect. Sometimes we're asking for feedback internally, and because there isn't that level of like emotional investment, we don't really get it. It's not very forthcoming. So I'd rather have the 55 replies versus the 2 or 3 or something. Okay,
yeah,
next
for
question
sure.
I've got, we kind of touched upon it earlier. Are there any player theories which you think are brilliant or are really, really bad? Have you seen any you want to call out?
Like theories in what way? Like as in like plans that people have made, or just like things people thought the areas would do and they don't, or
Okay, let's go for player plans. I'm not talking like Jagex conspiracy theories. Leagues, player plans to play in Trailblazer.
I don't know. It's such a difficult one. I think it's really interesting to see. For those of you who are maybe not in it, there's like a player-made leagues Discord, and they are absolutely crazy in there. Right? They're crazy passionate about it. They come up with all sorts of theories and stuff. It's hard to kind of pick. I think the interesting thing is that people have been so set in stone on specific areas. And it'll be interesting to see how they change now we've released them all. But like I've seen people who go, "Nah, I'm picking Wildy Desert," right? You know, and I'm like, okay, you can pick those, but I think they're going to be some of the least picked areas of the two. I think Wildy, for obvious the PvP connotation, some people would just rather not get involved in that. I think actually the biggest conspiracy was the rug. I think I'm not sure if you followed the rug discussion, but when we revealed the rewards, right? There's a rug of the world on it with Zaya blacked out, and there's kind of rough lines separating them, and they're slightly different colors. And people were like, they leaked the areas. They did, and I think technically we didn't because the rug's slightly not accurate, but we basically did. And I think that was the biggest conspiracy in that Discord was, is the rug right? People who follow the rug and people who don't follow the rug, the almighty rug. That was a lot of fun to watch unfold and see, because until we revealed all the areas, they had no idea, right? And people were forming strategies around that rug, right? People had like 1,000-line documents, written up of like my plan according to the rug.
That sounds quite biblical in a way. But like, you saying that reminds me of like the SpongeBob episode of the Magic Conch. But anyway, we'll move on. Okay, so we've been talking minigames a lot. Will all minigames be activated during leagues?
Some of them will. I think for like, we've taken a specific stance against some of them, and if they're not mentioned, they're probably included. So like, two examples of minigames that probably should be, for example, are Hallowed Sepulchre and Pyramid Plunder, right? They're just training methods. They're just branded as minigames. But like, people could do Trouble Brewing if they want. We're not stopping it. We don't actually have any tasks for it either, because we don't anticipate like the lobby finding of that to be very fun. Because of it's generally a not very popular activity anyway. I think the only one we're specifically stopping is Nightmare Zone, just because it would basically mean people could AFK train to like 25 mil melees or whatever, right? And just like that didn't feel. We don't want that sort of gameplay in the league. And then Last Man Standing as well, but that's less because we don't want it, and more so because the code is so ingrained to the sort of the maps, the worlds that it's set to. I don't think it would be an easy thing to have an LMS league world, because it's dependent on the world type that you're on. I could look into that, but it's interesting. And then someone chat there said Mahogany Homes. I think we've made a conscious decision to not include Mahogany Homes in the league. I think maybe. In fact, I might double check on that. I think that was what I advised, and I think Flippy said he might want to make it possible anyway. I don't know. Don't hold me to that, chat. I'll figure that out. That we've got a whole job still assigned to reviewing recent content, because when we did our design, right? See if I do. Hold on. We did our design here, right? And now we're over here. So all of our designs for the league are based on this, and there's a bunch of content that was released since, right? And we need to go through all that content and be like, have we accounted for that? But yeah, most of the mini games will still be there. I think you'll be able to do Castle Wars, you'll be able to do Tazar Fight Pits and all that sort of stuff, which, you know, Castle Wars with League sounds like, with League Relics sounds like a lot of fun, right? People play for fun, don't they?
Very few. Very, very few. You know what? If they enjoy mini games with relics, maybe we can just add some overpowered stuff to the mini games in future. Let's make it, like the chat fun. What is that? I remember playing for fun. I was 11, but then I grew up.
At
I
least
think
the
that's
idea of
the
playing distracted them from me trying to get the lights back on.
I do like the Slack message you sent. I'll expose you. How do I get the lights back on without looking stupid?
I've got nothing. It's motion sensitive lights, and I just sit here and it goes dark.
Okay, the next question we've got is related to minigames. So are there plans to keep Pest Control populated? Odds are there won't be enough people for the minigame to even function.
This is a hard one, right? Void is available in Asgarnia. Pest Control Islands countered that. Void is a very powerful armor set, offensively. And it feels like a good reason to pick Asgarnia. So, for that reason, we don't really want to stop people getting Void. But as for like keeping it popular, I don't know what we can do, right? We can't really say, hey everyone, you've got a quota of 1 hour of Pest Control every day just to keep the minigame active, right? I think we kind of saw that with Wintertodd in the last league, right? If you did Wintertodd during the first month, you could get to like 200 mil fire making, and it was very casual. And once you started going like later than that, you noticed that you were getting much smaller like games, which made it harder. I think that's just sort of the inevitable part of the league, right? It's going to be, if you're trying to people who are near the start of the league might have a slight advantage in getting Void than someone who does it in the last 2 weeks. Most of the league hopefully won't be like that, but anything that involves grouping with other players naturally will. So, yeah, but Void is just one reward. It's one aspect of that one specific area in the league, right? I don't think it's going to be that game-breaking if you find it hard to get Void later on. In fact, it might just mean you pick a different area if you're playing later, or you get different gear, right?
Sure, but let's revisit the mandatory quota. I think that's a top suggestion you've got. Let's just teleport people. Sandwich Lady appears, like, honey, it's time for you to play Pest Control. Teleports you there. You're not allowed to leave until you've killed X number of portals.
We could. I don't know if we can have like a Pest Control themed world and a league themed world. I think the World Witcher doesn't have an option for that, but like players at the very least, like in leagues, generally have a home world. I think there was a world last time that people just said, "Oh yeah, go to Wintertodd this world and do it." But there's not going to be a huge amount of worlds to hop through anyway. So I'm sure it would probably take like less than 2 minutes to hop through and find whatever the community has deemed as the Pest Control world. You know.
I think we can do our bit by pushing. You mentioned like leagues, discords, and stuff. If we can push these servers and push players into these communities, and you know what, they can work out when to go and play Pest Control.
Leagues Discord in chat. I don't know if I can. Should I? Is it then a Jagex endorsed Discord? I don't know.
I mean, you really mentioned it. It's Mod Husky endorsed at least.
So someone in the league's Discord, go send me a link to it.
Okay, we've got a couple more of these questions, and then we've got a load of Soul Wars stuff, which I'm going to come to you for, Mod Lenny. But we'll work through the rest of the league stuff. Next question. Will the area unlocks work on the amount of tasks completed, or work on task points, similar to the first leagues?
Before I answer the question, there's the Discord link in the chat. Yes, areas will be unlocked based on the number of tasks, but relics will continue to be based off points. Right? So you've kind of got that duality, I suppose, of it, right? Do you go for lots of low point tasks to get your areas quicker, or do you go for the sort of mid to higher range tasks to get your relics quicker? I think that just adds another depth of strategy other than just being completely linear, because we did consider that. We were like, okay, you've got this one bar, and is it split up into like 8 pieces? Do we force people to get areas at certain times? I think we just quite liked the duality of this and the extra level of strategy. It also adds a lot more value to those easy tasks that I think there were a lot of easy tasks that Twisted League people just never went for because they just weren't worth the 10, 15 minutes to go do it, but now that might be worth it. Yeah.
I kind of like the way we've been gamifying the easy task, but all the tasks as well. So, I mean, we've gone into a bit of detail in the Gazette article, but it's less about hit this level it's more about do this thing that you can do at this level. It makes it seem more like a role-playing game rather than like a spreadsheet sim.
For sure.
Okay, more of an open question this time around. How do you think all the leagues changes we've seen, so interfaces, tasks, points, relics, etc., how could they be well applied to Deadman? What kind of ideas do you have, or have you seen how we can adapt all this league's infrastructure into making like a really cool Deadman?
Personally, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a sort of expert Deadman mode player or anything, so this may not reflect what other people think. But I personally wouldn't want to see relics in Deadman, because I think it changes it a bit much from what people really want from it. They want this kind of not quite classic, typical PvP experience, but it's kind of stayed fairly true to the main game. Tasks, on the other hand, I think would be a really cool addition if we gave it some time and put some good thought into what tasks would be suited to it. It just gives people some better things to be doing, sort of aside from just PKing. Obviously, you see people get their skills up, they make money, whatever it is, and tasks would just add something a bit extra to that. So I think the task system is something I'd really like to see in Deadman.
I loosely agree with that. I think that like relics could potentially work if they weren't combat based. The thing that's really hard is that like it's much easier to kind of spreadsheet out what damage per second looks like against a boss that has like fixed defense and stuff. But what does that look like in like a tribrid situation, right? We could very much break it and not realize it. And I'm kind of guessing that we have in the wilderness, right? These relics were not designed fully with PvP in mind, right? So it's going to be absolute chaos and mayhem, and it's going to be great fun. And maybe the verdict from that is, yes, they're fantastic, but the verdict could also be that they're not. I think that relics and tasks are an identity of Twisted League, but I think of leagues generally. I'm doing what chat does, calling everything Twisted League. I think that it would be important to have a spin on rules for Deadman mode more than just either locking off. Like Deadman mode, we've just said, oh, no Zulrah, right? And then next time there's no suffering. I think that it would be better if we had rules that shifted the entire meta of Deadman, because I think as people saw, once you get to like season 7, 8, people go, right, okay, what do? I've got a Slayer Root, I get a Whip, I get a Trident, I go Barrows. I sell the Barrows pieces to try and get gear for other things. It's like a figured out strategy that people did, right? And people don't like the same questing again. So I think if you completely shake and break up the meta somehow, like these are the rules set for this Deadman mode, and that might not be area locked. It could be whatever, right? It could be even as small as you can't train your defense. So we end up with a pure Deadman mode, right? That will still shake up the meta drastically, because you have to do PVM with like no defense, and like that could just be enough of a rule in itself. And I think that we've kind of shown that over time with like that's why we're coming up with a different rule set for leagues. At the very least, I'd like to see the same level of design and time that we've put into the league to be put into Deadman to come up with something. And as Lenny said, right, tasks could be an interesting way to start scoring people instead of just like the 1v1 thing. It could be a mix, it could be whatever, but I'd like to revisit all of it, right?
I think your sentiment on making sure we give Deadman the same level of production quality and design time as leagues is shared across all of the old school team. I think it's quite a sore point among all of us that at times we had to rush to meet the next season, and then the next tournament, then the next season, and the next tournament, and all of that kind of all of the infrastructural stuff, fixing the many bugs that would emerge between each event took almost all of dev time, which meant Deadman got stale. So if we were to go from like the 4 times a year down to the same similar cadence to leagues, maybe alternate between the two, making sure there's plenty of time, then we can give it the same level of polish. And like Lenny said, maybe relics don't fit it, and it's more of a task-based thing, or maybe we do what Husky said and adapt relics to fit. I've been playing a lot of Hades recently, and I think the idea of maybe like those kind of relics being made available and adjusting the way you fight other players would be pretty cool. Or at least the PVM, those kind of different effects. I think there's so much potential to do something similar. I saw on Reddit earlier actually somebody brought up Darkscape again. Now, Mod Husky, I think this was way before your time for joining Jagex. I'm not sure if you knew much about it as a player, but me and Mod Lenny were here at the time. Darkscape was, RuneScape 3's equivalent of Deadman, that kind of open world, dangerous PvP type stuff. So I'm sure there's some design elements we could go back and steal from there as well.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got just one more question to do with leagues. That said, there are loads of chat questions, a lot of them are leagues. Mod Husky, I went back, so I timestamped the stream from last week when I put it up on YouTube. I really enjoyed your question speed run. I'd like to try that again later. We'll save all those chat questions and we'll blitz it.
It was so much fun.
It looks it. I mean, I'll be honest, you hogged a lot of the questions for yourself, but that made it speedrunnable. So maybe I'll hand over to you for the chat questions at the end.
I think it was very possible because they were all league focused, and I've been one of the 2 developers focused on leagues for months, so I just knew the answers. I think it's harder when there's curveball questions thrown in,
That's cool.
But,
okay. Yeah. Okay, last league question we've got on the doc is... Oh, I'm not sure what it's referring to. I'll ask it anyway, and maybe you guys will understand it. Why does this unlock Swan Song? Shouldn't that be in Kandarin, since that's where Piscatoris is? Is it just so that making friends with my arm can be completed?
So this is why I really want to put the areas out ahead of time, right? This is why I was pushing for this, because there is so much to consider for every area, how they connect, what quests you unlock, what content's available, blah, 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 all this sort of nonsense. That was my job, right? I'm going to miss things, right? And sometimes it's a diary task, and that would be really easy, right? But I made a mistake with Agarnia, right? I started off my early design being I need to give the making friends with my arm quest. And I had that assumption and I moved forward it, forgetting that Weiss was part of Fremennik and not Agarnia. So I ended up completing to me, it was just okay, it starts in Agarnia maybe, and that's where it was. So when I re-looked at it when it was brought up in the League's Discord, I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Okay, well, I don't even need all these quests. And I think the GIF in the exclamation mark area is that blog just has Merlin's Crystal as the only lock for Asgardia now, because it's the only quest that we felt like we needed to complete. I think that one's for heroes. And then when we looked at it, I was like, Fremennik has a lot of quests. He has everything under Dragonslayer 2. I'm not really comfortable 2 weeks before we go into our sort of release stream that I want to add suddenly and ask QA to verify another 20 quests not breaking something in Fremennik, right? So we just decided, I think I've put on the blog, on the thing, Weiss still requires making friends with my arm. I'm 90% sure that's uncompletable because I think you're 1 area short. And that's fine. It's literally on there just to say that Weiss is considered the Fremennik province area, but you're not going to be able to complete it. There's maybe some quest combination that just gets it with the quest unlocks. I haven't had time to look into it. But that's kind of the verdict, right? Weiss is a very minor sort of benefit to have anyway, right? It's just salt technology and a herd patch, which isn't game-changing. It's just a small qual. So that's where that's at. But yeah, that was a mistake, right? And yes, Kandarin does unlock Swan Song itself, which I think you could see on the blog itself.
Cool. Like you said, the blog's out now, so hopefully that answers some of the questions players are having as well. And I guess just to reiterate, a lot of the stuff that's shown in the blog, which is > areas in the chat to see it, that interface is in game at all times, so you'll be able to try before you buy. Okay, before we move on to the next batch of questions, Mod Spear, I think you're going to throw up a nice image for us. That transition is so smooth. Okay, this was player designed. I'm not sure if you guys saw this at all. A good opportunity, a good attempt here at theory crafting the type of items you'd be able to get from each different region. This was before we started sending out all of the different interfaces and information about different areas, so it might not be wholly accurate, but I've got to say, props to the person who put this together, and I'm really, really sorry I didn't track the name. But props to you regardless. Anything stand out to you as being wrong or incorrect there?
I think this version's much better. I think I saw one version that missed things like crystal armor, I think, from Taranduin and stuff. This looks pretty accurate. I I think there's a few minor things that maybe just weren't felt like important. Things like the leaf-bladed battle axe from Fremenic and stuff. And the cannon is listed in Kandarin, but requires Agarnia as well. But the graphic maybe doesn't show that clearly. It's like it's in both, but someone might just look at it at a glance and think that. Yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. This is essentially the job I had to do.
Sorry?
This is essentially the job I had to do early in design, right? Is go through all the content and put it into areas, right?
I'm told in the chat that a player named Man-Made Magic made it. If that's true, good job, friend. Great effort. Okay, thank you very much, Spear. Let's move on to some Soul Wars questions. Mod Lenny, I'll be coming to you for the bulk of these, I expect. The first question, and before I ask it, I'll give players some context. If they haven't already seen the blog, which is !minigames, we announced Soul Wars and we said there'd be a player cap, 60 players per team, 120 players total. And the question is, why is there a player cap on the number of people who can play in a game of Soul Wars?
So this is mostly a technical thing, really. I think people who played Soul Wars way back when, or people who've basically been involved in any other content more recently where you get a lot of players in a single place, will notice there's some performance issues around there. Once you go beyond a certain point, you'll just notice the game starts to sort of clunk up a bit, basically. And we want to avoid that in Soul Wars. We don't want too many people stacked up in one place, causing the game to slow down and make for just an unpleasant playing experience. So we need to draw a line somewhere or other. It's not quite a limitation in the sense of we can only have this number, but it's a case of beyond some point, it's just going to start sort of tanking the game a little bit.
I think what we're going to say in the blog revision is we'll keep an eye on it. If we feel like we can kind of incrementally increase it from 60 to 65, 70, 80 and so on, then we'll try and do it. But it wasn't through any conscious design decision then. More to make sure players can play the game.
Basically, yeah.
Nothing more to add to that. Mod Lenny knows a lot more about Soul Wars than I do.
I don't know if my audio or if I can see Sween talking and not hear him.
That's because I'm very polite and I mute myself when I cough. And I do this in Zoom as well. I don't take myself off mute. Right, okay. Next question is, why did we opt to remove the Slayer elements from the minigame this time around?
So basically it's just a bit much at the point it sort of gets to, where you get people who will go and get their jellies or Pyrophene Slayer task and just go to Soul Wars to just do that in there and get a little something on the side while they're at it, rather than really playing it for the minigame itself. We kind of wanted to avoid that a bit, as well as we've seen points, especially we've seen with Boss Slayer Master proposal, that people complain, you're doing a lot for Slayer, and if we kept it that way and it was just like, hey, we're sort of framing it as a minigame, but here's this way to go and do your Slayer tasks and get some more out of it, it adds on to that sort of constant stream of Slayer improvements, basically. So yeah, a couple of things at play there, but we just didn't feel like it should be offered as a sort of an addition to Slayer.
That's a fair point. Next question we've got then on Soul Wars. And, okay, not necessarily Soul Wars related, but a bit indirectly, looking at the context of how Soul Wars sits in RuneScape 3. What do you each personally think about the Nomad quests? Would you want them added to Old School?
I would personally rather do what we've done. Bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, lights. Maybe not. I guess I'm sitting in the dark. Here we go.
There we go.
I'd personally rather see us do what we've done with various other quest lines, where we sort of followed along the same rough storyline as RuneScape do, but take our own little bit of a twist on it. And I'd quite like to do that again. There is a possibility that we could just, similarly to Soul Wars, backport the quest. Obviously, it's not just a tiny little thing, oh yeah, we'll just backport it, it's done. There'd be more work to go into it than that. But if it was something that people really wanted exactly as it was in RuneScape, then we could be open to the idea. We haven't exactly ruled it out or anything. So far as, and this in this case, this is very much my personal opinion. As far as the actual questline itself goes, I think it kind of, not directly, but it leads you down the path of some of the more god-heavy quests in RuneScape, where eventually you end up at Sliskay's endgame, where you're just having a good old chat to Zamorak in a maze, which, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that in the context of the quest, in the context of RuneScape. But in old school, we don't necessarily want the gods to be grounded in that sort of way. So I'd be careful about going down this quest path that do that to the game, yeah.
I echo those sentiments about the gods. I don't know much about the Nomad questline, if I'm being honest. I didn't play when that was introduced into RuneScape, and I haven't looked up since. I know he's a very iconic character that a lot of people love, and I know he's got a lot of story around him. But like with anything else, this isn't just let's copy-paste from one game into the other. We are looking and reviewing this content to see where it fits into our game. Our game is at a very different place now than when the quest and the minigame were originally introduced. And we have the benefit of hindsight that like you never really get with a lot of things. Soul Wars had some problems, right? And we're looking to, now that we have this fresh slate, you know, like, what do we want to change? And I think that comes down to it a lot. Like, that's answering the previous question with Slayer as well. I do agree with the whole sort of, the big difference between the games is the gods are sort of more visible in that game, whereas we want to, I think most of us on the team want to keep them as vague sort of entities that exist, but you don't really know why or like what they're doing or what their true motives are. And I think that barrier of sort of like you never really know, I think adds a lot to the story and lore we've got going right now, you know?
I agree completely. I mean, this is again just looking at personal preference, which is what the question was asking us. I'm a big sci-fi and fantasy nerd. I have been since I was young. I've always preferred low fantasy compared to like the high fantasy elements. Things like Discworld, when you're following normal everyday characters. That's what I love about RuneScape. You're just dropped in as a character with crap stats and no gear at all, and you have to go around the world helping people. I don't actively dislike a lot of the really god-heavy quests you mentioned, but it's so bizarre to consider you're standing next to a god or you're battling a god in person. I'd much rather they kind of had those. They're either confined to history, and you hear talk about god wars of old, or there are kind of like more fantastical elements happening in the background that you don't interact with directly. That's again personal preference from the way I like to read and play fantasy and play sci-fi and stuff.
Yeah, and on that note, I saw chat somebody pointing out that no, the first Nomad quests weren't exactly very god heavy, but it's a question of, okay, cool, we get a Nomad quest in game, and then where do we go from there? Because that is where the story ends up leading. Without getting into spoilers, as someone in the chat pointed out, it does end up going down that sort of more god heavy route beyond the first quest. So it would just leave us open to that question of where do we go then, considering we don't want to go that way.
Cool. I think what I'd like to do, you know what, we've touched upon these points, but Mod Ed has very kindly added some answers to a few of these questions as well. So I will be his proxy. Mod Ed says, I think before looking at Nomad's Requiem in particular, we need to decide if we want to backport quests at all. Quests are a bit different to minigames due to their heavy story ties, and it's fair to say that for many, the RuneScape story went in a direction that wasn't what they originally wanted. It's definitely not a no-go, and we'll work with the community to decide how they want us to move forward with quest backports. If we do go ahead with them, there's no reason why Nomad's Requiem couldn't be one of them. Okay, next question then. And Mod Lenny, since you were very heavily involved in actual experimenting reporting, I'm coming to you for this answer. When you began experimenting reporting content, why did you choose Soul Wars and you didn't choose another piece of content instead?
So my personal answer to this is kind of Ed turned around to me and said, hey, do you want to backport Soul Wars? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. I think the kind of reasoning that led us there to that point in the first place was more that Soul Wars is a very sort of well-rounded and also self-contained piece of content It's kind of got everything we need. It's got bits of combat. It's got sort of big avatars to fight against. It's got new pieces of land. It's a well sort of rounded minigame. It has lots of objects, bits of scenery, NPCs, animations, everything like that that we kind of need to experiment with backporting. There are other pieces of content, things like ceiling creation, which I can see people in the chat bringing up, which they're still sort of very self-contained, but they don't have the same, I guess, broadness of things that they sort of allow us to experiment with. I don't think there's a whole load of animations and new NPCs or anything to come back with ceiling creation. So it just doesn't allow us that same level of experimentation as Soul Wars did. It had a bit of everything that we needed.
Cool. And to the players saying, can we get ceiling creation as well? What do you say to those people?
Well, as Sween mentioned at the start, there was a blog post and survey put out recently, which included sort of getting people's thoughts on backporting content like this, seeing what people think about things like ceiling creation, say shooting stars, Fist of Guthix. Ceiling creation is definitely one of the things that's on the cards as far as we see, if people want us to go this route with backporting a few pieces of content.
Cool. I guess as well, it's also important to note that we're offering Soul Wars because of the experiments. It meant that the content is in a position where it's developed enough and rounded enough to be polled to players. We only really like polling content when there's been enough groundwork laid. So it's not as though we can just say, actually, you know what, we've seen enough people say, I don't want Soul Wars, I want Stealing Creation instead. Let's switch it up and poll Stealing Creation. It's not a this or this. It's a here's Soul Wars. If the porting works, you can have Stealing Creation in the future, perhaps, or a variant of Stealing Creation. There's also lots of things to consider, like, you know, again, how we adapt the design to make it fit old school. I'm personally a really big fan of all the changes we've made, in particular the team balancing, changing the way the matches are settled. I do like the removal of the Slayer and replacing it with a general damage modifier. So I'd be interested to see what we can do with Stealing Creation, adapt it there. Maybe that's one for the future. Okay, this question is for all of us, and it builds upon what we've just been discussing. If any, what RuneScape content, RuneScape 3 content, would you most like to see added to old school?
I think for me, Stealing Creation is definitely up on the list. And then what might be more of a controversial opinion is some of the distractions and diversions. Of varying controversy, I suppose. Some more dailyscape than others. But I used to absolutely love Shooting Stars. The Big Top Bonanza, I can't remember the name. Can't remember his name, but the guy with the Big Top Bonanza, where you got the cool little red overcoat. And Penguins, I was a big fan of, which I'm not sure how I feel about them in old school, but they're a very nostalgic sort of itch for me.
As I kind of said earlier, I haven't really played RuneScape all that much. I remember I departed not long before the whole EOC thing happened. It wasn't the reason I left. I just, when I was younger, I played World of Warcraft instead at that point. But with that said, I think one of the things I see RuneScape get praised a lot for is it does, this is only from what I've heard, so don't take this as truth. I've heard they do PVM content really well. So if I could take anything over, maybe I'd more so just look for like inspiration for things they might have done, mechanics I've never thought of, or implementations for systems that we've never had. I think that might be cool. Ed says in chat, Nex is a very sort of popular boss. I don't think I'd want to copy anything specifically. I think I get this a lot, right? Is like, what would you like to copy, or what would you maybe what quests do you want to finish? And I've always said I want to do my own spin on things, right? Like, or I want to come up with my own ideas and put them out, right? And not like finish or steal someone else's, you know? So I think I don't think I'd be inclined to not steal, but go for anything from RuneScape and port it over personally. But, you know, something that, as someone who really likes PVM content in our game, I think I'd like to, if anything, go down that sort of route.
Cool. Considered. Mod Lenny, I think the answer you were looking for was Baltazar Beauregard's Big Top Bonanza. I just googled it. I never played it.
I just
love. I used to love penguin hunting. Like, I know there's a lot of dislike for dailies and weeklies in old school RuneScape, but I used to really look forward to the weekly penguin hunt with my clanmates. We'd spend half an hour jumping around the world in the. I used to miss the friends chats and the clans chat dedicated to it as well. Otherwise, there's not necessarily a single piece of content I'd like to bring back. You know what I'd like to bring back? Everybody's mentalities and attitudes towards the game when they were like 11, 12, 13 years old playing, and YouTube wasn't very prevalent. There weren't any live streaming sites. You were using Tippet and RuneHQ, and yet I love the old school wiki. It is amazing, but there's too much detail. Go back to the terrible guides on Tippet and RuneHQ, which were just so wrong, and then you have to kind of experiment and play. But we can't go back in time, so this is the world in which we live. Let's just embrace it and make the most of it.
These days, when drop dates are absolutely known, and people complain when they're 10 kills over a drop that nobody cares about, right? It was more fun when you were just. I think back. I remember one of the things I did so much as a player, which was stupid, was killing iron and steel dragons for a visage. I don't know why. I was just like, this is going to get me so much money. I must have killed thousands of them and never saw anything, right? And I don't think I knew the drop rate was 1 in 10,000. I just did it. So.
I knew stats were a thing, but I just liked looking cool, what I thought was cool. So my outfit would be black D-hide, desert boots, cooking gloves, Legends cape, and then some kind of white hat, probably the Christmas jester hat, the red and white one, and a glory. And those stats were terrible for training melee, but I'd go and kill with shadow warriors beneath the Legends guild or something. And that's what I'd do. I'd run nat runes. And then I'd get jealous because I had a mate at school. We're still quite good friends. We keep in touch. He played properly, so he was always 10 steps ahead of me. Apart from when I spent like a summer where all I did was play RuneScape. I missed so many of my friends' like birthday parties because I'd make up a lie and instead I'd be at home with my private chat off.
That feeling when you see a friend off and you bump into each other in the game.
Oh my god, yeah, and that happens so often too because we always use the same worlds to play on. Anywho, let's go back to the game question. I'm sure the players don't want us to reminisce. That's for another time. Okay, so context for players. In the recent iteration of Soul Wars, we've decided to implement a type of mercy ruling, which means that the team that first gets to 10 avatar kills win the game. The game ends. Question we've got from players: why have you implemented this mercy rule?
So this was one that came more from Ed than myself, but it's a fairly common thing that you see in a lot of games nowadays. And although, yeah, it can be fun to have sort of like comeback story of the century where a team that's however many points down suddenly comes back and wins and turns it all around, it can also just be really frustrating when you're just on the losing side of a game and you're kind of waiting for it to come to it. You're just waiting for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, however long a game might be, and you just know that you're going to lose. It's something that we are open to sort of keeping an eye on and possibly changing, though. And I believe there was one example that Ed pointed out when it was being discussed. He particularly likes the idea of people at 9 points versus 9 points, whatever, and there's this sudden rush to get the last point. It's not just, we've got another 10 minutes, we don't have to rush for it. It's that sudden thought of, wait a second, if we don't get this first, they're going to win now.
Yeah, I think I like generally when there are like a couple of outs for a game, right? You know, like I think it adds a lot more strategy and depth, right? It's not just one metric that determines the winner because you've got to consider your defense, right? You've got to think it doesn't matter if we're winning, it doesn't matter if we've got more graveyards. If they go ahead and get those 10 kills, we lose, right? I think it adds a lot more like complexity to the game. And I think someone said in chat 10 might be too much. It might be. right? This is something that even once released, we could review later and say, hey, this threshold of 10 is not doing it. Maybe we reduce it to 5, right? Maybe we reduce it to 8, you know? Who knows?
That makes sense to me. Okay, I'm conscious of time now. We're at 6 o'clock and we've got lots of questions, and I know we want to carry on. So let's. I'm not going to speed run like we did last week, but let's just pick up the pace. First come, first serve. Okay, next question. How do you feel about the idea of only allowing players to join Soul Wars games via the green portal?
So when this first came up, the first sort of issue raised internally was that you can't have those clan versus clan games. You can't just have one clan goes into one team, the other clan goes into another. And the idea to sort of work around that was offering a sort of right-click challenge option like you can for Clan Wars. But we recognised that that still leaves you out of being able to just, you got 2 friends and you want to just go and play on the same team. It sort of complicates that a bit where you've got to try and juggle around to make sure you get on the right team rather than just being able to say, there's a game that's nearly ready to go here, let's hop on that team. So it's something that we're still sort of discussing, considering, but we want to keep that in mind. We don't just want to jump to it and say, yeah, no, we've got no problems here, let's do it.
Yeah, I think playing with friends will be a big part.
Sorry, Mod Husky?
So I was just saying, I think, yeah, playing with friends is like the biggest argument to me, right? If you're going to play a minigame, you probably want to go and team up with your friends.
All right. Okay, next question. Isn't Soul Wars related? I'll answer this one. Are we having a Halloween event this year? Answer is yes. Mod Brow, our new artist, has already previewed one of the very spooky pumpkin POH awards on Twitter. So can I quickly put this link in and not slow things down massively? There we go. Go take a look, go take a follow, and look at the spooky stuff in the chat. And I think next week's stream, we plan to be teasing a few more things. So you'll expect to be able to play the update in just a few weeks' time. Okay, next question. Mod Lenny, Soul Wars a game. Why did you opt for the original avatar models instead of the placeholder cows you previewed back in, I think it was March's Gazette?
I mean, we've got to save the big cows for Tis Cows Up, really. No other way around it.
Okay.
I think we should add a third transmog to the pet that just turns it into a cow.
I love it. Yes. Mod Ed's answer is removing the cows was a tough one. They were simply too powerful to properly balance the minigame around. Alright, next question. Again, in regards to Soul Wars, is it possible to get a green cape transmog reward for the Soul Cape representing Guthix?
So again, this was another answer from Ed, and basically from a law perspective, the red and blue teams weren't linked to Zamorak and Guthix like they are in Clan Wars, so it doesn't exactly make a whole lot of sense to just go have a green one for Guthix, because the blue one isn't a Saradomin one, the red one isn't a Zamorak one.
Fair enough. But could we have a green one anyway?
Maybe. I'm not going to say yes, but I wouldn't say no either.
Maybe it works for
me. Cost a mil.
Okay. Next question. Again, Soul Wars. Will players be able to attack their own barricades and raise the activity, manipulate the activity score that way?
So you will be able to attack your own team's barricades, but it won't contribute towards sort of your activity, no. So if you've got a tactical reason to want to do it, go for it, but you can't just do that to sit there and sort of scrape by. Cool,
works for me. Next question. Will the activity counter drop whilst you're a ghost or you're in the graveyard?
I don't believe we've got a final answer yet, but if it does, then we'll make sure that it's not too much.
I think if anything, as long as we make sure... I think if anything, as long as we make sure it can't reach 0, perhaps, or like, at least maybe while you're a ghost, or at least there's an opportunity to, right? It would feel pretty bad if you as a player were, oh, I'm just about out of activity, you go and do something, and then someone kills you. Right. And it depletes while you can't do anything. But yeah, there's pros and cons to both, isn't there?
Yes, certainly is. Okay, next question we've got, not Soul Wars related, but more to do with current topics. Why are we in this position with the BLS, and what are you going to do about it? Very good question. I can't tell you right now what we're going to do about it. In yesterday's game update post, we offered a proposal for it. In terms of how we got here, I think this is kind of, I'm stealing some bits from a reply to Reddit I posted last night. The honest answer is that we've kind of put ourselves in this awkward position unintentionally when it comes to things like polling and PvP rewards and wanting to do the right thing, knowing it'll annoy a lot of other people, but wanting to do the right thing for a small community. That's probably the wrong thing to do. It didn't have the desired effect we did, but now we don't really know what to do next. There isn't an ulterior motive behind making unpoll changes or by trying to force a certain weapon into the game. Personally, I don't really care if the weapon's in the game or not. It's no skin of my teeth. It's more to do with the kind of the process that led to here. I think the next, not perhaps the next step, but the right fix that's going to come from it is the polling charter and the polling review when you do. Polls are central to the game. This comes from top down in Jagex. You know, we point to like recent integrity changes and stuff, but we've always polled the really big hitters, things like skills, or even what was the last year, for example, you had like really controversial polls like warding and partnerships, which offered in-game cosmetics. We polled bonds. We'd always poll those really big hitting things. I think we've just made a few mistakes along the way when it comes to trying to make small niche communities happy. I think the thing we did with Ultimate Iron Man recently has been a step in the right direction. If we're able to identify the types of players that the content is going to affect, then we should be consulting them primarily. Maybe we only limit the polls to those players, or maybe we weight those players a bit differently so they get more of a say. Similarly, I'd like to, going forward, be asking the experts more. It makes more sense to, look at like raids polls or high-level PVM polls. If a player doesn't have the anywhere near the relevant levels, why should they have the same kind of say or approach? And again, that's just my personal opinion on the way we move forward with it. The only thing I can say is that next year we will be, at some point, once we've worked out it internally, publishing a polling charter, which clearly says what we poll and why we poll it and how we poll it. Just so there's no, ambiguity about what we're doing or why we're doing it, and you have something set in stone, hold us accountable when we're perhaps doing the wrong thing. Next question then. Are the Rev Cave design choices finalized? Again, not necessarily set in stone. We want your feedback on it. In yesterday's game update post, we offered a proposal for how we'd like to approach it, including changing the way combat works in terms of multi and singles. We are offering something called Singles Plus. We're going to relocate the spawn points for Revs all around the caves, moving some of the non-Revs creatures elsewhere, and also nerfing the drop tables too. So we're quite confident that the changes we're making will have the desired effect, but if you've got feedback, please send it our way. We won't be implementing them without properly looking at the feedback and making changes accordingly. Okay, back to the minigame stuff. Some of the Barb Assault changes you suggested will help new players but will negatively impact experienced players. Are you going to go ahead with the changes anyway? So post-blog, there were 2 points that really stood out. The take hammer option, which we were going to suggest, it's kind of come to light that that's going to disrupt the established barbarian assault community. It will disrupt their meta when it comes to using food and the inventory management, so we're not going to go ahead with that. Also, the option to remove, well, not an option, also our proposal to remove tunnel blocking would again impact the established BA community. They use that tunnel click to path forward and navigate the way and stack mobs and stuff. So we're not going to offer that either. For us, it's a case of we were thinking of some nice quality of life changes for some new players to Barb Assault. It's kind of come to light that those changes wouldn't be good for the game, and if it's not broken, then we're not going to try and fix it. So we're just going to remove it. We're offering some Devil Coal stuff instead, like the colorblind friendly eggs, and looking at a few bug fixes that players have raised since. This will all be mentioned in the blog too. Next question we've got about the minigame stuff. Are we concerned that the Swampbark armour proposal is too strong? Again, we'll go into detail on this in the blog. If any players are unaware of the context, we're proposing that Swampbark is a type of split bark armour we're going to be polling with the Shades of Morton rework. the set effect is a slight buff to binding spells on the standard spellbook. We have adapted the numbers slightly, so the holds, the binds will last for slightly less now. I think 3 seconds less or 2 seconds less for each tier of spell. But generally, if you're looking at standard spellbook versus ancient spellbook, I think you need to consider the risk involved as well. Someone on a standard spellbook, if you're looking at being able to teleblock and entangle for a long time, then use the Tome of Fire to hit high level damage, they're going to be risking a hell of a lot more than some dude with an ancient staff and salad robes. Okay, next question. When can we expect to see the plans for new content next year? The answer is we don't really know. We're in the middle of 2021 planning and beyond that as well. But I imagine there will be some kind of RuneFest-esque event at some point, maybe late this year, early next year, where we talk about all the cool new content, that kind of like really hype bit. But other than that, I think we'll carry on doing what we're doing with the Gazette, which is giving you a snapshot of the roadmap as it unfolds. Maybe keeping something secret, so we've got like the really big hype moments. Oh, okay, next question we've kind of touched upon already. With news about Soul Wars being released, are there chances for other mini-games to be added, like Stealing Creation or Fisted Guthix? What Ed says, the important thing about Soul Wars is that it's not a question of X versus Y. It's X first and then possibly Y later. In short, if it goes well, we can totally look to add other mini-games or other types of content from around that era. Okay, Mod Husky. Let's go fast with these chat questions. We've got lots of them. Lockins G says, which area unlocked Dragon Slayer 2?
Reminic.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that one.
Reminic.
Awesome. Okay. Next question is from Echo, and they say, could you touch on when the LMS update could be? The one we're proposing. I'm not sure. I know the minigame changes that we're offering will kind of stagger between end of this year and into early next year. So that might have to be the level of confidence and clarity we can give you there. AGB asks, are Nightmare changes coming next week? We don't really have any operators on the team, on the chat. Do we know?
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe, but we don't think so. Tortoise asks, are there God Wars instances planned for Trailblazer League? Come on, chat questions. Give me the right league.
It's something we're considering. I don't want to make promises if we can't keep them. Stay tuned for more news soon.
Excellent. Thibaut Vane asks, are you planning to release curse prayers in old school?
Not planning to.
No.
An alternative,
Ricky Smith.
An alternative prayer book's always an option, right? But I think players have already said Soul Split is broken, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be totally on board with a new prayer book if there are good ideas for prayers that fit old school. Okay, Ricky Swift asks, can the collection log transfer from league to league in the future?
Can, yes. Probably not. It's a colossal amount of work.
Okay. Biochromatic asks, when can we expect to hear about the tasks for gaining league points in Trailblazer?
We are hoping to reveal all the tasks and the relics when the news post goes live on the 28th? Yes, 28th, when the league goes live. So you'll get 30 minutes to review it before the game starts.
Cool. Use those 30 minutes wisely, people. Pasty99 asked, will any of the proposed changes to Barbarian Assault affect the way the game is currently played? The idea is we hope not. I've just kind of gone into a bit of detail about the changes we did propose, which were actually really bad ideas, and we're not going to do them. Instead, the other changes will be fixing bugs and kind of minor quality of life stuff, making it colorblind friendly. I was on a call with Mod Rock the other day, actually. I'm not sure if Mod Lenny, you were on the old school team at this point. Do you remember ages ago, I think it was one of Mod Tom H's projects that he didn't cause the problem, but he was having to fix it. We fixed a bug in Barb Assault to do with ranged ammo, and then because of that, we had to go into tons of work into making new BA-specific range ammo that would work with different colors and that kind of stuff.
I have a vague recollection, yeah.
Yeah. Since then, we've kind of realised that let's not try and force these stuff into the poll without doing our research, or fixing bugs without doing our research properly. So the answer is No, hopefully the pro changes won't affect the way the game is currently played. Kate, Yordo5 asks, is there a date for when the fishing boss is going to be released? Well, we haven't blogged and polled it yet. We're hoping to do that in the next couple of weeks. We had a lot of feedback to work with, and since then we've got like way more assets and design to show you. If it passes a poll, it will be early next year. I think, as we mentioned in the most recent Gazette, !Gazette to read those. Freisinger asks, in leagues, can you unlock Elven lands without Agarnia needed to be able to walk there, etc.?
Yes, you can. You can unlock the areas in any order. There will be a teleport button on the League's interface that will take you to a hub in that area. So in this case, it'll take you to Prif.
So fancy. Weewoon asks, could we poll adding damage bonus to the Arcane Spirit Shield since we didn't add the polled Siren book?
I'd rather use that for potential reward space in the future. Feedback from the Siren's Tome was that perhaps we should use the Arcane as an attachment to that. So maybe we'll look at that moving forward.
Agreed. I think that person was trying to do some merching. Nam Van asks, will we hear about any of the other relics before the league starts?
No, 30 minutes before.
Okay, non-idiot asks, Wildy deaths are PVM deaths, but does the PvP mechanic when dying in rev caves still apply since the PVM death for rev caves are considered PvP deaths normally? Maybe look at the sheet to get an understanding of what the question's trying to ask. These are taken directly from chat, so don't blame us for asking the questions, blame yourselves.
I don't understand that question.
I don't either.
What happens in the PvP is if you're in the wilderness, it will run through the PVM death code and will do whatever it needs to do for setting variables for skulls and stuff and blah, 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 right? The normal stuff that happens, like your skull person gets reset or something. I don't know. I can't explain it very well in chat, but it essentially does a PVM death, but like will mark that this person was like, it updates your KDR and stuff as well, like all the stuff that you might want it to do. Whatever's defined in normal PVM deaths occurs. So if people have asked about untradables, I think they're just lost because it's a PVM death above 20 Wildy, so don't take untradables in the wilderness.
Cool. Okay, next question isn't necessarily one for a speed run, but let's try and answer it quickly anyway. With Trailblazer, are there any other ideas you tested when coming up with new lead content? If so, what were your favorite ideas that didn't make it?
We had tons of league ideas. A lot that we didn't go with. Some of the highlights were we had something that was resembling Darkscape. We had one that was like, I think we talked about one of the gazettes. We had one that separated the world into different seasons. So you had like a buff for being in summer, winter, etc. We had, when we were looking at areas, we were thinking about splitting it east versus west as well. So like you'd pick a side of the map to be on down the membership wall. We've had all sorts of ideas for like potential pieces of content. I can't think of anything specifically that was implemented that we would want to bring forward, but every idea is on the table for next league, right?
I'd still quite like to see something rather happen with Flippy's scrambled idea.
Oh, that's fantastic, actually, yeah.
I liked it. It reminded me very much of the Nuzlocke challenges from Pokemon. Those kind of like very varied experiences each time you play. I've got to say though, you touched upon a lot of the faction-based ideas, Mod Husky. But it did get to a point when we was at the off-site meetings and it felt like we were designing a new MMO rather than a new league. And we just kind of had to sit back and say, you know what, this is too big a scope and all these new gameplay mechanics aren't a league, it's a brand new game. So let's go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and I think we kind of just realized PvP in leagues might not work very well, and we might just want to have Deadman be the PvP seasonal game mode and leagues be the option for people who don't like PvP and Deadman, right? There's no reason the two can't coexist.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Okay, next question. Can we buy old rewards from Twisted League with the new league's points?
Yes.
Cool. Next question is talking about PKing at Edgeville. Can we ever expect Edgeville PKing to be incentivized again, whether it's Bounty Hunter or something else? I guess the quick answer is we are quite wary of adding additional incentives beyond the loot you're getting from killing your opponent. I think the best way we're going to be able to incentivize Edgeville PKing is by onboarding new players in the PvP process, making them aware of where they can go in PvP. But when it comes to adding additional new rewards, I think it's unlikely. I'm happy to leave that answer there. Fenke's asked, is there any talk about expanding the desert in any way?
We've talked about it.
We have talked about it. Next question, can you reset your league's areas if you don't like your choices?
No. We'd have to figure out everything you did in that league, reset the tasks, figure out what drops you had that you shouldn't have, and it just gets weird, right? It would be meta to chop and change areas. The areas are locked in permanently, so choose wisely, right? You don't get an area choice straight away, so you'll have plenty of time to think about it as time goes on.
I'm imagining like the crap that would happen if we started trying to roll back accounts for different types of content in different types of places. That would be unfathomable. I'm to be asked, will Ava's devices be locked behind Mauritania, or will they be unlocked from day one?
They will be available to people who pick Mauritania because they'll be able to do the quest, and they will be available to people who pick Fremennik because Dragon Slayer 2 auto-completes that quest, which was kind of a conscious choice because you get the Assembler as a main perk from Fremennik, right? So, yeah, those two areas only.
Cool. Next question is, in the past we've had polls over how the community feels towards different subjects. Would the team be willing to add these more often to polls to get a better read on the community? I guess the answer is yes. In the Soul Wars poll, for example, when we're looking at Shades of Morton, we're asking for general opinions on whether you prefer the 2004 aesthetic versus the 2007 revamp using assets from like barrows and stuff. We're also not looking necessarily at the formal polling game, but more to do with like either bigger, wider surveys. So for the past few years, we've done like a big annual survey outside of the poll module, but it gives us more flexibility on the way we ask questions. So it's not necessarily a case of here are 10 different answers, pick one. You have access to normal surveying tools like ranking and even explaining why you've chosen. More recently, we've sent some kind of small limited surveys asking about things about combat achievements. I want to be sharing this with like the results in the community soon. But TLDR, we took like a random sample of 10,000 players who voted in recent polls, and then we sent a really short survey asking about combat achievements to those players. So if you voted in the poll, you might already have it in your message center. The next question, will people have access to Rune or Addy dragons with just Misthalin unlocked?
No, the dragons are considered as being within Misthalin because they are within that region. But they are not accessible because you will not be able to complete Dragon Slayer 2. And I believe it's impossible to complete it. I'm like 99% sure it's impossible to complete it normally, so you'll only be able to kill them if you gain access to Fremennik.
You're saying there's a chance. Right, I'm thinking it's 6:25. Let's take a few more and we'll wrap up, and then we'll start the next stream by blitzing through the last of them. How's that sound?
Sure.
Okay, cool. We'll go. Yeah, we'll just take a couple more there. Quackhead asked, "Is it confirmed we will need desert darts, or could that still be changed?"
To smith them, not to fletch them. If you get the dart tips through other means, you can still make them. But otherwise, yes, you will need to unlock desert to efficiently make darts.
Cool. Next question: when items are unlocked by a quest that's been auto-completed, like the Elemental Shield, how do you recover those items if they're lost outside of the region?
Elemental Shield is going to be in the Slayer store, and you can reclaim Avas anyway from Ava, right? Am I wrong about that? So you have access to that because you're in Misthalin. But I'm sure there are small cases where we might have forgotten something. Someone will go, "Hey, I got this with my region, then I lost it, and now I can't get it back," and we probably just hotfix something at that point. Our go-to generally is the League Tutor. There's like a collect option where he'll give you items if you lose them. So there's a bunch of items. Like I think if you lose your Draman staff that you get given at the start, you could just get another one from the tutor, right?
Cool. Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, the last question we're going to ask on this stream, and you know what, we've got 30 more we'll save for the beginning of next stream. Will there be an introduction on how Trailblazer works for newer players?
Yes, courtesy of Mod Ed, there is a brand spanking new shiny tutorial that takes you through the progress better than chat boxes like from an NPC like we had in Twisted League. It walks you through how the interfaces work, how you can find out more information. It walks you through unlocking Karamja as your first new area. So, yeah, it's fairly exciting. And I think that Mod Tide did the original work. Like, it's a tutorial similar to the bank tutorial that you guys have seen, where you get these nice boxes that move around, and it highlights the portion of the screen you need to click on. So, yeah.
And we're going to reward players, right? They'll get access to Karamja as a reward for completing the tutorial.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. In that case, we've asked and answered a lot of questions. I'd like to thank you for joining me, guys. Let me run through the announcements again. So what we got? ! areas in the chat, and you'll be taken to a blog which contains details of all the new areas, including a look at all the pretty interfaces coming with leagues. Got some quite early feedback that the rolling GIFs are quite annoying for you to navigate. So we'll look at what we can do there for you. ! Minigames. So last week we released a blog which looked at Soul Wars and other minigames. The blog will be updated tonight with some feedback changes and poll questions, but give it a look for a general grasp of the Soul Wars proposal and concept. ! Wallpaper. To get some really cool wallpapers featuring the league's art styles. ! Leagues. We've been talking about it a lot on the stream, but just in case you didn't hear us, Leagues is coming on October 28th. ! Leagues to go and watch the gameplay trailer. ! Gazette. Recently we published September's Gazette. We talk roadmaps, we talk Leagues design, we talk new JMods, updates and active projects, and we ask for your thoughts on porting content from RuneScape to Old School. And within that survey, we do actually ask you about Stealing Creation and Fist of Guthix. So if you're one of those chat guys asking about Stealing Creation and Fist of Guthix, give it a read and give it a vote. ! Prime. Get 7 days membership when you link your Old School account to Prime Gaming, only until October 13th. And I'm going back to Mod Husky because he wants to talk about the blog.
Sure. So just a note on that areas blog. Everything here is essentially what you guys see as version 1. Version 2, we'll try and update as we go along. What I'm kind of hoping is that we can have a change list at the top of things we've done, whether it's a quest we've added to a region because of your feedback, or whether it's a removed from a region, or anything else that we've done that we just haven't covered, right? The reason we put these out is to get feedback. The Discord community have been awesome for that. I think they've already got it on. They're going to compile all the things I may have missed, because we already changed all 3 of the areas we've already released. So just be aware of that. Keep an eye on the blog as updates come in, and hopefully, by the time that comes to release, I'd like to have hopefully sent the absolute up-to-date GIFs on the last week, so that you have the GIFs with all the final information, right? So please leave your feedback. We do read it, whether it's on Reddit, message me on Twitter or something, right? It's all appreciated. So thank you, guys. We're all going to make this league awesome together.
We will make it awesome together. And I think we've got one last announcement that's happening right now. Mod Spear, you said you stole an image about the Discord event. You want to throw that up and I'll talk a bit? Okay, today, right now, there is a Q&A talking about mental health. It's Mental Health Awareness Week. It's in conjunction with our charitable partners, with a CPSL Mind, Princess Trust, and You Are Rad, who are Rise Above the Disorder. That's on our Discord server. Let me throw a link into the chat for you guys. Oh, Dragon Spear is doing that at the same time. I was wondering why he was calling Moobot a sod, but it wasn't working apparently. There we go. So yeah, do drop by. They're doing amazing work. We've shown a lot of support from them this year, and we can always continue showing them more. Drop in, ask any questions you might have, or just even lurk and look at the answers they're giving for others. They've got tons of really helpful resources. Share it with any friends you think will benefit from access to this. And I think that is largely it. Anybody for anything else? Shaking heads.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for hosting last week. And thank you for joining this week. It's good now. I can farm the workout to you. With that said, we've got a new community manager joining us in early November, so I'm sure I can farm out a lot of the work there as well. All right, okay, that's it. Thank you very, very much for watching. The 30 to 40 questions we compiled from the chat, which we haven't answered, we'll answer next time. Thank you, Mod Lenny, for joining me. Thank you, Mod Husky, for joining me. Thank you, Mod Sani, behind the scenes on chat, and thank you, Mod Spear, behind the scenes, making the stream look so, so pretty. And Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll see you shortly. See you next week.